And so, yeah, I had to immerse myself in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I had to watch any and all mixed martial arts broadcasts that I could. I had to learn the entire history of the UFC. I had to go to events. Um, I had to consume everything I could. And it gave me a really unique insight where I think from the outside, I viewed it as this blood sport and almost like a feral, sort of like primitive kind of obsession with violence. What I found is like the most hardcore and engaged UFC fans really deeply loved the commitment to this sort of pursuit of technical excellence. They were inventing something new. They were trying to find what is the most effective set of combat tools to leverage against an opponent when you just ask that open-ended question. And so you had all of these different practitioners of all of these different martial arts, boxers, wrestlers, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, what have you, and they were all sort of coming together. And at that point, they had figured out, oh, we need to start cross-pollinating and hybridizing, and sort of we have to learn. I can't just be a full boxer. You can't just be a full wrestler. We have to sort of like learn these different skills and figure out what the best solution is. And the audience was highly aware of this too. They were highly engaged. They sort of understood the fighters. They understood their backgrounds. You'd be watching these like intricate dances of two fighters who are moving through different positions. And if you're not aware of what's happening, you might just see some knee pass over a thigh and be like, I don't know what just happened. But the crowd like roars. And you're like, wait, what? And it just opened my eyes that the core audience here was just this super insightful and plugged in and connected viewer. And that's what they would be looking for out of the video game. And so we ended up making like this really like hardcore, like super technical video game that like it was really a really hard sell within the organization, who again, they're used to selling this very like simulation style sort of like wrestling game. And we were like, no, we're going like all in with this extremely like complex sort of fighting system because we think that's what players want, or at least the audience, the UFC audience wants. And it ended up being absolutely true. Like it's like a hugely successful series. I know EA took over the series and still makes them today. But the thing that players and reviewers resonated with most strongly during that time was just how faithful we were to sort of that technical pursuit. And that's just not an insight I would have been able to leverage in the game had I not done the work to understand what I was making and who I was making it for. And I just fundamentally believe that teams have to do that work. It's really hard for me to say that games makers have to be gamers. But at the same time, it's really hard for me to imagine a games team that doesn't deeply understand who they're making a game for being successful at making a game for that audience.
So that kind of pivots us a little bit into second point, or perhaps, I don't know, second and third, because the first point was you want to go into opportunity spaces where the prototyping team has outsized expertise. Yep. And then number two, where there is clear opportunity for innovation. And number three, where players have shown strong interest in experiencing something new.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to take these together or one at a time. I guess I'll leave that to you. But these both sit in that space of like, you know, I read those and I was like, there was something in them that was like, that seems right to me. And simultaneously I was going, but man, I could see like people going, well, every place has clear opportunity for innovation, or like, well, players will show interest in something new if you give it, you know, when you're thinking about that and you're applying that lens.
Yeah.
I'm going to key off on the idea of you have to select and then get to know the audience you're trying to hit. And so there's probably some amount of conversation we could have there about like, how do you even, you know, you're trying to make a new game. How do you know or make a guess at what your audience will be? And then how do you, because you need to do that first before you can know them. And then like, what do you know? How do you know that they've shown strong interest in something new or whatever it might be?
Yeah, this is tricky. And I fully admit that, and I even say this in my article, that this is not a one size fits all approach to game development. I know that there are
Hmm.
a lot of, intuitive teams and developers out there who just really they listen to their hearts, or they make the games that they want to play. I hear that all the time.
Yep.
And these are obviously like tried and true and successful methods for making games. Again, I don't have that inner voice, and so I can't rely on that um, to find my next game opportunity. So for me, and yeah, we can talk about two and three together. I think how I think about it, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, was okay, I've got a team who can make a game. Um, I fundamentally believe that, like, because I have this experience as a player, um, if I have a game that I enjoy, what I'm looking for is not the exact same game from some other team that
Yeah.
I can just sort of have an additive experience with. I'm like, no, I already have this thing and I'm going to consume it and I'm going to love it and it's going to be great. But then I'm going to be a different person after I consume this thing. My tastes will be fundamentally different. And so I probably need a product that meets not who I was, but who I am today. And so, in the same way that, like, the reason I was saying, like, I can't figure out like a new fighting game idea, for instance, is because I don't think what I'm trying to do is make a game for someone who's really enjoying fighting games today. I'd either want to make a game for someone who has never enjoyed a fighting game before,
Hmm.
or someone who is tired of fighting games and is looking for
Hmm.
the next thing in their sort of experiential journey now that they've played fighting games. And that to me is how I sort of describe like the clear opportunity. So there's either got to be like clear market signal that there's a whole bunch of players who are really interested in a new experience on one end of that spectrum for me to think, oh, okay, there's opportunity here. Um, if there's just one big game or two big games that are out there and they've sort of like carved out these huge massive pies, and they're maybe the only two instantiations examples of those games having success, it might be difficult for me to think, that this is how I sort of supplement that, this is how I can like add to and expand, I can chase the market on sort of like one end or the other. So like that, really there really needs to be signal there, um signal of innovation there for me to like find a clear opportunity to pursue. The um the last one is tricky. That sort of demonstrated interest. I learned this lesson, I think, very viscerally at Riot because we tell this story so much about Dota. Um, I was not a Dota player. I was a huge Warcraft 3 player, a huge Frozen Throne player, and I had played Dota. Like, I'd gotten to
Hmm.
that point in Frozen Throne where we're like, okay, well, we're bored. We've played our 1 billionth game. We're just sort of hanging out, and someone says, oh, hey, have you played Dota? I'm like, no, I haven't played Dota. And then I played it, and I was like, cool, that was Dota. And didn't, it didn't hit me. And I guess, like, because I had my player lens on, it didn't hit me as this obvious opportunity, but it did for, our founders. Like, they saw it. They felt the hunger of the audience. Um, and they saw how the audience was contorting themselves to engage with that experience, even though there was only a
Yeah.
tiny amount of them. There was just a tiny amount of them, but they weren't reacting to their size, they were reacting to their intensity. And I tend to look for that a lot as well. I tend to look
Mm.
for, where do I see an intense, outsized effort to engage with an experience, even if that group of people, the amount of people who are engaging with that thing isn't necessarily that big. Um, and this requires, again, as a product person, I'm looking at the modding communities, I'm looking
Yeah.
at indie games. I'm always looking at sort of like the different sort of like lesser serviced parts of our gaming community, and I'm trying to discover what experiences that they themselves are showing that high effort and intensity for. And if there's not someone out there that's serving them, at scale,
Yeah.
um, that's a really attractive opportunity to me.